Welcome to Steps to Cope, an intervention that aims to develop the resilience of young people who have experienced hidden harm. Hidden harm refers to the situation where young people have been impacted by a parent or another family member's drinking, substance misuse, or mental ill health. Steps to Cope was developed in Northern Ireland by the Steps to Cope Partnership and is an adaptation for young people of the adult 5-step method. You must receive training in the intervention model before you can use Steps to Cope to support young people. We have produced this training video as a resource to support trained practitioners working with young people who have experienced hidden harm. In this video, we will take you through the Steps to Cope intervention, and together we will explore what you can do to prepare for the steps, highlight the information you should cover in each step, as well as offer advice on reflecting on your work every step of the way. Thank you for joining us on our journey to develop the resilience of those young people living with hidden harm. The Reid Resilience Scale for Adolescents is what we use to measure the impact of Steps to Cope. The questionnaire should be completed prior to beginning the Steps to Cope intervention and completed again after Step 5. The Reid Scale can be found in the Steps to Cope Essential Pack and in the Steps to Cope workbook, and the scale is also integrated within the online intervention, which can be found at www.stepstocope.co.uk. Before we begin, you should have close to hand some of the tools we use to complete the intervention, which include the skills template, the workbook, and the website, which is found at www.stepstocope.co.uk. It should be noted that while we encourage you to use the Steps to Cope workbook and website, this will not suit everyone and should not be considered essential to completing the intervention. You should always give your young person the opportunity to choose how they want to complete Steps to Cope. The skills template, on the other hand, is the essence of the intervention, which means it can guide you as the practitioner to complete the Steps to Cope intervention without the use of the workbook or the website if you or your client would prefer it that way. As you prepare for Step 1, it is important to consider exactly what you need before, during, and after using Steps to Cope. Take a look at this table for some guidance. Here are some tips on how you can prepare for the session, what information you should cover during the session, and finally, how you should bring the session to a close. Good morning, Alice. Thanks very much for agreeing to see me again today. As you know, when we would have spoken the last time, you would have been talking with your teacher, Miss Mallow, about trying to get yourself some help, about some situations basically that are going on at home. Obviously the last time we would have gone through the resiliency paperwork and talked a wee bit about what Steps to Cope is really all about. And it's about trying to sort of think over the next couple of weeks now about trying to get you that bit of help that we talked about in that meeting. But Step 1 is really kind of all about having an opportunity to tell your story, and ultimately you say basically what you kind of want to talk about, and the idea is to get whatever you want sort of off your chest, because the idea is a problem shared is a problem halved. So with that in mind, do you want to tell me about how things have been in the time that it's been since we last spoke? Okay, so it seems like you're maybe finding things a bit more difficult to talk about today, and that's natural. You know, this situation is something we call hidden harm, and it's one of the reasons basically that people find it so hard to talk about. Maybe they've been told that they can't talk about it. Maybe they haven't sort of known where they can turn to or who they can talk to in order to get some help. So it's perfectly natural to feel this way. And you might feel angry, you might feel unsure, you might feel worried or upset. And all of those feelings they're neither right or wrong, they're just perfectly normal, given what you've been through. Some people actually find it useful to use some of the materials we use, such as the workbook, which some young people have found helpful because it's actually been put together by young people who've been in similar situations where you've been. So with that in mind, did you want to take a look at that, and maybe that'll help you talk about some of this stuff? Let's take a look at page 10. Here the authors have highlighted what it has been like for them when they were living with a parent who drinks too much. This can help the young person you're working with see that they are not alone in their experience, and this can help them begin to talk about what things were like from their perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I don't know. I'm just really worried about my dad and my family. I don't know how I feel about talking about this.
Okay, and that's perfectly all right. You know, these things can take time, and as I say, it can be hard to talk about it at first, and that's natural. It's natural to feel worried. It's natural to feel angry. It's natural to feel afraid or upset. All those feelings are normal, because a lot of young people will basically have told us as much when they've worked with us before. All you have to know is that you can sort of tell us as much or as little as you kind of want to talk about from your own personal situation, and you can feel safe in the knowledge that it'll stay confidential.
Thanks.
So it sounds like you don't really know where to start, but it sounds like you're really worried about your dad and your family.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting out of hand. Mum and I are living at Uncle Frank's again. I really thought the last time we were living there would be the last time. I mean, Dad said so. But Dad doesn't seem to be getting the message. He can't keep his promises, and I don't trust him.
Okay, so it sounds like you're finding it really hard to trust him. How does that make you feel?
How do you think? It's really winding me up. He's lost his job, he drinks all the time. I can't get on my Xbox because he spent the subscription money on booze. So I don't have any way of talking to my friends outside school. I feel so alone since my brother left. It's just not fair. He and Mum fight all the time. He's sleeping downstairs on the sofa. Though he might be back in the bed now that we're away.
Sounds like you're feeling really isolated. It sounds like you're feeling really quite angry with your dad and quite worried. But it sounds like your Uncle Frank is someone who's really there for you.
Yeah, Uncle Frank's a legend. He's Mum's brother. He's been a big help. But he's working all the time, so I can't really talk to him. And to be honest, when I do just get mad at Dad, I don't want him to be angry with him. It just upsets me and Mum, and Dad has enough problems without Uncle Frank on his case.
It sounds like you really care for your dad, despite what's going on for him and how difficult things have been for him. But have things always been this way?
Well, yeah, he's my dad. I guess it's always been there. He's always had a drink. Just didn't really understand when I was younger that it was like a problem. But it wasn't really back then. My mum used to too. I think it was after Granda died that it got worse. But he's just been drinking more and more, and Mum says he's sick. What do you think?
Some people do see alcohol addiction as a sickness. Sometimes it really helps them sort of think of it that way. But really it's down to how you feel about it. Well, that's us at the end of step one. How has it felt about talking about things today?
Felt a bit weird. I mean, I've talked to my family a couple of times, but it feels like a bit of a weight's been lifted off.
Well, it's natural that it would feel weird, but it's good that you feel like a bit of a weight's been lifted off. With this being the end of our session today, what have you sort of got planned the rest of the day? Because I don't want you sort of leaving here today and thinking about maybe what we've all been talking about here today and not being able to sort of not think about that. Checking in is important. It reminds the young person that you care, and it gives you an opportunity to signpost them to somewhere in between the end of this session and the start of the next one. It can allow you to safety plan if any risk is present, or help alleviate any pressing worries they have before they leave you. Mindfulness techniques can be useful to be used here also, to ground the young person after potentially talking about difficult things for the first time. Likewise, you can encourage them to keep a journal of their thoughts regarding the drinking or whatever's going on for them that you could talk about with them the next time you meet. It is important not to rush, and it is natural that a number of sessions may be required to complete step 1. It is also important at the end of step 1 to invite the young person to tell you what they want to know. This way, you as the practitioner can prepare to answer questions the young person may raise in step 2. It is important to consider, as with all the steps, what you need to do in order to prepare for the session. With step 2, ensure that you have the materials ready that you may need. This could be the workbook or the website. Ensure you know what way your client will want to complete this step. Also, it is important to remember to ask the young person to consider what they want to know prior to the session. Preparing the information is key to ensure the information can be understood, as there is a difference between knowledge and understanding. You also want to ensure that you are not overloading them with information that they do not wish to know. Before we begin, let's take a look at this table. Here again are some more suggestions on how to prepare for the session, some information on what should be covered during the session, and finally, how you should bring the session to a close. It's good to see you again, Alice.
It's good to see you too.
Thanks very much again for agreeing to see me. As you might remember, the last time we would have gone through step 1, and that was an opportunity for you to tell your story. Step 2 is more so about information and finding out some things that you feel might help you understand things a bit more. So the idea is really knowledge is power at the end of the day, and the more you know about something, maybe the less worrying it will be for you. So with that in mind, is there anything you particularly want to know about?
I'm not too sure what I want to find out.
Okay, and again, that's natural, you know. Just based on some of the things we might have talked about though in step 1, one thing you wanted to know about was why your dad maybe couldn't stop drinking, even when he said he was trying. There's some information about this in page 11 of the workbook. Will we take a look at that? The information within the workbook was identified by young people who have lived with alcohol misuse in their family. It has been updated to include information around drugs as well as mental health difficulties. There is information within self-help as well as in the workbook and throughout the website that young people may find useful to answer some questions that they may have. It is important to ensure you do not overload the young person and only answer the questions that they want to know the answers to. So does this make sense?
I think so. You mean my dad's addicted?
He could be, especially because you're saying he's really trying to stop and he's finding it difficult to do so.
I didn't think he was trying before. Maybe he is.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever tried to change your behaviours before at any stage?
Well, I tried to make a rule that I would do my homework when I got home from school, you know, like to get it out of the way and then like enjoy the rest of my night.
Okay, and how went the new regime then, in that sort of sense? Did it work out for you?
Not really. I normally head out on my bike if the weather's good, or play Xbox till tea and then have a food coma and not want to do anything for the rest of the night because I'm not motivated to study.
Okay. So yeah, just in that sort of way, it can be really hard to change your behaviour. Maybe it's a similar sort of situation for your dad.
I guess so.
And it can be the same for people who are maybe misusing substances. When they start using, maybe it's a case of they're trying to use it to help them relax or help them to socialise. And without even realising, it can start to become more of a problem than what it actually is.
Yeah, I guess that sounds like my dad. I mean, he wasn't always like this. So
having looked at the stages of use then, where do you see your dad sitting on that?
I think my dad's maybe sitting at dependent use. He's drinking to excess all the time and seems to be finding it hard to stop.
Okay, so he's drinking to excess all the time. He's finding it difficult to stop. How does that make you feel when you're looking at that sort of situation?
It seems like he's lost control of it. Is he gonna be okay?
It's hard to know. Hopefully in time he can start to think about what he needs himself and what he can do to help make himself better. But it could be really difficult when you're living there in that sort of situation and seeing those sort of things happening, because you maybe feel like it's out of your control and you maybe want to be able to help, but you feel like you can't.
I guess so.
Is there anything else you would like to talk about, or any other questions you'd like to ask in relation to any of this?
No. I think it's helped to go through it. I think I understand it a bit better.
It's important that the young person is clear on what the learning has been. Getting them to repeat what you said or asking them questions about what they have learned is important. If they are leaving with more questions, then it is important that they know where they can find some answers. Signposting is okay to do here, but it is important to check in with their learning the next time you meet. There is a difference between knowledge and understanding. There is a useful exercise in the workbook to summarise this learning, or you could do it in a more creative way, maybe in the form of a quiz about what information that you've discussed. Do what works for you and what works for your client. Step 3. Coping. As with previous steps, it is important to introduce the step for the young person and explain what will be covered in the session ahead. Step 3 is useful to help a young person identify their coping strategies and see how they could do things differently. Exploring coping strategies is best done using the exercises in the workbook and the website. Here, they can consider what is helpful or unhelpful about how they are currently coping and what may be helpful or unhelpful about trying something different. Let's take a look. It is important for a young person to hear how they have chosen to cope is okay. Living with hidden harm is an extremely challenging situation for anyone to be in, and it can leave them feeling very guilty. There are a range of exercises in the workbook and on the website that identify how others have coped when living with hidden harm. It is helpful to remind young people that these coping strategies were shared by family members who have lived with hidden harm. This will reinforce that they are not alone and how they have chosen to cope is okay, and they should not feel bad about it. We only want to help a young person see that they have choices in how they cope. If how they are coping is making them feel guilty, sad, or remorseful, then it's probably something they should reconsider. Looking at how young people cope and how they want to cope is important. By the end of step 3, the young person should have a good understanding of what coping means to them. They should have a good understanding of the ways in which they can cope, and the young person should feel confident in the ways that they will cope going forward. Before we begin, let's take a look at this table. Here again are some more suggestions on how to prepare for the session, some information on what should be covered during the session, and finally, how you should bring the session to a close. So now that we've been looking at how other people have been coping in similar kind of situations, let's start to think about how you cope in your situation.
Okay.
So how do you feel you cope with your dad's drinking?
I'm not really sure I am.
I mean, for one, you're sitting here talking to me today, aren't you?
Yeah, I guess so.
I get the impression maybe you feel like you want to cope with things maybe a bit differently, rather than coping how you're coping now. Would that be right?
Maybe.
Well, let's take a look at how you're coping currently, and that way we can look at how you're doing things now and maybe how you want to think about changing things.
How I cope is just depending on how much he's been drinking. Before I would have, well, when he wasn't in the kitchen, I would have poured it down the sink.
And how did it make you feel when you did that?
So. I mean, most of the times it wouldn't work and Dad would just go to the shop and get more.
Okay. And what about other times?
Other times he wouldn't notice. He'd just be passed out.
And how did that make you feel?
Sad.
So it sounds like it maybe wasn't something that was working for you overall. What other things have you tried?
Sometimes Uncle Frank would come over and get me. and we'd go out and spend time together.
Okay. And how would that work?
Well, Mum would call him when she knew Dad had been drinking a lot, and she'd hurry me out of the house.
Okay. And what was helpful about this then?
Well, I would be away having fun with my uncle and I'd be happy.
Was there something that was unhelpful about it though?
Well, sometimes I'd worry about Mum and be wondering if Dad's okay. But it was kind of balanced out with my uncle, and it would just distract me all he could. He's a funny guy.
So how else then would you cope with stressful situations now that you're not living with your dad?
Well, I'm not able to go into my room, and that's something I would have done because it's there at home where I'm not. And to be fair, when I was out with Mum and Dad, I'd be drinking, and I couldn't do this either.
Okay. So what would you find yourself doing then?
Well, it started happening less and less. We just stopped going out as much as a family. So when that happened, I did just spend more time in my room, really. Really, if he'd been drinking.
So when you were in your room then, what would you do?
Just talk to people on Facebook or gaming on my Xbox. But it was hard doing this because I'd often be wondering like what was going on downstairs.
And so who then would you talk to online?
Just whoever, really.
At the end of step 3, you're checking in with the young person again. At this stage, they should have a good understanding of their coping mechanisms and hopefully feel good about how they're choosing to cope. If they are unclear about coping, it is okay to go through these exercises again until the young person feels that they have coping mechanisms that work for them. At this stage, you're also planting the seed for step 4, which is on support, so you can get them to think about support and who they use for that before the next time you meet up. At the beginning of step 4, you will help them define the term support. This is important, as what you may see as supportive may not be supportive to them. Helping them work out what the best support for them is what step 4 is all about. Next, you should explore who it is that they use for support and what it is about them that makes them so supportive. Working this out will help you with the final part of step 4, helping them use more positive support and use less negative support. Before we begin, let's take a look at this table. Here again are some more suggestions on how to prepare for the session, some information on what should be covered during the session, and finally, how you should bring the session to a close. As before, there are plenty of materials on the website and in the workbook to facilitate this step, particularly the exercise that helps them consider who is there for them, at home, in the wider family, at school, in their community, and further afield. So
what are we talking about today?
Well, today we're going to talk about step 4, and that's really all around support.
You mean how I talk to you about this stuff?
Yeah, but also trying to look at what support kind of means to you at the end of the day. So not just the people in your life, but what else you can do that you feel is supportive.
Well, like support's someone I can rely on and someone who's there for me.
Okay then. And who do you have in your life that you rely on then for support at this point in time?
My mum, definitely. She's always there to look out for me and listen, and she sees Dad drinking like I do, and she's always there when it's happening.
Okay. So she's somebody who really sees things from your perspective as well and sees the same things that you do. What about your Uncle Frank then?
Definitely. He's maybe not as close as Mum, but that's only because he gets angry about Dad. I mean, my dad's my dad. So regardless of what he does, it doesn't help when he slags him off.
Okay, so we've talked a bit about your family then. What about friends?
Well, there's Ralph at school, but I don't talk to him about what's going on at home.
Okay. But in what way do you find Ralph supportive?
Well, he makes me laugh, and he's a good friend.
By the end of step 4, the young person you're working with should have a good understanding about what support means to them. You should also use the workbook to help your young person consider the range of support that they have, whether this is at home, in school, in their wider family, or in their community. Step 5. Further help. Step 5 is about ensuring that the young person feels prepared for moving forward as you bring your work together to a close. It is useful to review goals if they had set any at the beginning, just as it is useful to ask their perspective on their experience with steps to cope. In your review, you should also ensure the following. Number 1, that the young person has had an opportunity to talk about their experiences, and if necessary, who else they can talk to further down the line if they felt that they needed to. Number 2, you should ensure that they know where to look if they have further questions. Number 3, you also want to make sure that the young person feels good about how they are coping. And number 4, finally, your young person should have a good understanding about who is there for them in their support networks. Step 5 is another opportunity to build on these and extend them as required, perhaps through signposting on to another service for further identified support. Let's take a look at the practitioner goals in step 5 to remind you of what you should be aiming for before, during, and after your use of steps to cope. As before, there are various tools to assist with step 5, both in the workbook and on the website. Is there something else you'd like to discuss?
Since we've started talking, I've been taking some pills myself.
Okay, so you're taking pills? What kind of pills are you taking?
It's just some stuff my friends have been taking.
Okay. And how does that make you feel?
Not great. I mean, my friends are doing it and it's fun. It just makes me feel worse after.
Okay. So it was maybe a bit of fun at the beginning, but now maybe you're feeling a bit unwell with it or feeling a bit guilty maybe about it?
Yeah.
Okay. Should we take a look at maybe what kind of help we could maybe try and get you for that?
Maybe.
Okay. Well, there's lots of different services out there that offer support to people who are maybe finding it a bit difficult to stop taking certain things. And likewise, people might have been using something as a coping mechanism, but over time it's something that they find it doesn't help them. Like it maybe makes them feel a bit guilty or makes them feel a bit unwell or worried. So we can take a look at options about that if you think that would help.
Yeah.
Okay. This may be a good opportunity for signposting, and the warmer the handover, the better. Some young people may be ready to stop and take a break by the end of step 5. However, they may wish to actually get a referral at a later date, and it can be worth reminding them about the likes of waiting lists. Following completion of step 5, you should ask the young person to complete the resilience questionnaire again. Some young people may need your help to do this, while others may wish to do it themselves. As usual, you should give them the choice. Following gathering of the data, you should send it back to the Steps to Cope partnership for the evaluation. We hope that you have found the Steps to Cope training video helpful. We wish you the very best of luck with your use of the Steps to Cope intervention, and we hope it makes a positive impact on your practice and in turn helps develop the resilience of the young people experiencing hidden harm that you're working with. Finally, for more resources and information on Steps to Cope, please contact the Steps to Cope partnership via ASCERT on 0800 25 45 123. Or alternatively, you can check out our website stepstocope.co.uk, which is full of resources for practitioners and young people and is the home of the online self-care version of the Steps to Cope intervention. Thank you.